Hey everyone, Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. It is the 20th of December, 2022, as I am recording this. And on today's show, we are discussing the transfer portal. We are discussing tampering. We're discussing National Signing Day and also Max Duggan's decision to go to the NFL. All of that and more is coming up on today's show.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, Locked On Big 12 podcast. I'm your host, Josh Neighbors. Make sure you guys subscribe on YouTube. We are 70 subs away from 3K, which is our goal. We're trying to hit 3K subscribers by the end of the month. That'd be great if you guys could help us hit that goal by subscribing. You guys can find us also wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, all those places. You guys can find me on Twitter at JoshNeighbors_ and also find the show at LO Big 12. This will be the Wednesday edition of the show. If you guys are interested in National Signing Day, covering it from a conference perspective is tough, especially now that we have 14 teams, at least for 2023, that we have to do this for. And so I would really encourage you all, if you guys are curious about certain teams, to go and check out our conference hosts. We have a lot of these teams covered. I mean, the coming in teams, we've got 3 of them covered: Cincinnati, Houston, and also BYU. We've got Oklahoma State covered. We have Oklahoma covered. We have Texas covered. We have got TCU covered. We've got a lot of these teams covered, right? Kansas State. I can do some stuff on that. I'll do some stuff in West Virginia, maybe some Iowa State stuff on my end. But most of the time, we have y'all covered when it comes to these individual schools. So make sure you guys go check all of those out. KU, I think we got covered too. Yeah, we've got covered. So make sure you guys check that out. More from a broad perspective from me. The first thing about National Signing Day, guys, is I think for me personally, one of the more, I don't know, I don't love signing days just because I see a lot of the fan reaction. I see the criticism of 17-year-old kids and 18-year-old kids and what they have decided to do. And, and this is separate from the NIL stuff, which we'll get into, the tampering and whatnot. I remember myself at that age making mistakes, and I made a lot of them: 17, 18, 19, 20. I mean, only 25 now, but still making mistakes. And I made a lot back then. And these kids are still figuring out who they are as people, as football players, as athletes, and they're going to go to these colleges and figure out who they are. And so they might make the wrong call. All right. But don't kill them for it. They're kids. I know they're getting paid now too. So you feel like you got some, ability to crush the kid a bit more, but really, let's be honest, they're still kids. Right. And even though money's involved, scholarships are involved, NIL is involved, your team's success is involved. Just remember, they're kids. And sports is my life. I cover it. It's what pays me. It's how I, pay the bills, the rent, all the medications, the groceries, all that stuff that everybody else pays for. But these are still just games. These are people. They are kids, right? I think it's something that we important that we sometimes lose sight of when we get around National Signing Day. Especially if you read some message boards, there are some insane posts. I know some of them are tongue in cheek, but you see kids getting killed for a flip or whatever, and you don't know what went into that decision. You can assume money, and sure, a lot of times it is, but you don't know the kid's situation and whatnot. I mean, you're on there, paying for a subscription, you don't know what that kid's financial situation is. So when it comes to individuals, I would say let's leave the lambasting for your coaching staff who didn't do enough to secure a kid, or your boosters, whatever. I might not agree with it all the time, but maybe that's where the ire should be directed as opposed to the individual kids, because we were all 17 and 18 once, for the most of us who are watching this, right? So let's talk about that. The tampering aspect, let's get to this. So what's changed in college sports, a lot of us know here at the NIL and whatnot, is that it's basically the same, some of the same game is being played, but now it's just out in the open, right? NIL makes it okay to be we flipped a kid from, I'm not saying this is happening, but Oregon to Washington, from Texas Tech to Oklahoma State, right? And, in the old days, the bag man used to come in late and give an offer that, player X couldn't refuse. And there's still some of that happening. But now it's like, the NIL collective scrounged up some more money and gave a late offer that team X, kid X, Y, or Z could not refuse, right? And that part, obviously, we have to get some control on, right? How that looks, what that looks like. But still, money changing hands at the deadline to make sure guys, go a certain place. It happens in, professional sports. It happens in college sports, obviously. And so I don't think we should be too critical of that. The places where we should be upset about it are like situations that we heard about today. So I tweeted about this and it came up. Mac Brown made a comment. He said, I can't say who they are and don't ask Drake. You know who they are. Just look at all the ones who are getting all the top recruits. Referencing his quarterback, Drake Maye, and he was talking about some well-known schools attempting to tamper with Drake Maye and ask him to get into the transfer portal so they could go and grab him. Well, Pat Narduzzi, the Pitt head coach, added even more to that later on today when he was doing a radio hit somewhere, 97.3 The Fan in Pittsburgh. He said that he's heard two schools who offered UNC quarterback Drake Maye $5 million to transfer. He won't say who, but he says he knows who. And then he says it's out of control. It's only going to get worse. It's sad. It's a sad deal. So that's where we're getting up. That's where we're at. I don't know 100% about the it gets worse. It's going to get worse type deal. It depends on what you think might get worse, but here is my 2 cents on this. So number one, the NCAA is accountable for this because they had no plan at all, like for when this became legal, right? And this basically has now become, like free agency, but it's worse than what free agency is in pro sports because of the lack of guardrails. Like there are tampering guidelines in the NBA and the NFL and all of these things. I mean, Phil Jackson got in trouble for it when he went to he was one of the Knicks at the time, went to one of D'Angelo Russell's games when he was at Ohio State, right? We know there have been issues in the NBA with tampering constantly. It's something that's always talked about. And how much of player-to-player contact can you monitor? Sure, not a lot, but people reaching out to players who are currently on rosters and asking them, offering them certain amounts of money to come play at certain schools is something that should be policed. And so I think even to go along beside this, Jeff Traylor at UTSA has said that he is submitting multiple examples of this happening to players at his school. That is something that he has said. And here's the quote from Twitter. Dear at NCAA football, how does at UTSA football report Power 5 schools who are trying to poach our young talent? How much evidence do we need to make this not be a part of our game? And so look, I'll say some of the stuff from coaches can be disingenuous because they probably all tried this other people. But like, if you look at a Frank Harris who's coming back for his senior season or, his last season at UTSA, how is this not happening to a guy like that? Right. And so this falls directly, and he tweeted at NCAA football, directly back on the NCAA, who decided, as opposed to prepare for what felt like the inevitable, college kids being able to make money off their name, image, and likeness, which always felt like it was fair, right? As opposed to preparing for that, they chose to spend time fighting that in court, and they lost badly, a lot. And now that it's come, does anyone believe they've got teeth on anything? Because we're watching, we saw Oklahoma State get punished. It was garbage. We're watching Carolina basketball get off easy. I thought Kansas basketball got off pretty easy, right? I did think that Arizona basketball, guys, basketball programs are so small. And the idea that Sean Miller didn't know anything. And here's the problem is is it about what you can prove? Sure, whatever. Yeah. But don't we always say the buck stops with the coach, right? So if people are running amok in your program, in Sean Miller's program, and guys, look at a college basketball bench. I'm telling you, you go college football sideline, gigantic, right? There are coaches, there are GAs, there are tons of players, there is support staff, and doesn't count the people in the booth. There are not as many people behind the scenes for a 15-man basketball roster as there are for a 100-player college football roster, right? There's a reason why there are multiple guys with the same number on the field, and sometimes you have penalties, right? If number 2 and number 2 are on the field at the same time, there's a reason why, because sometimes we have to repeat a number or two at a certain spot to make sure everybody can, be available and whatnot, right? So that's the different reality. And Sean Miller, is let off the hook, right? And other people are getting these massive show cause. Like, all right, so Sean Miller had no idea. No, that's the problem with this, right? And so now we focus our attention on these things, and the NCAA does nothing about Arizona. And some people think they shouldn't, whatever. But like their ability, their teeth, they've gone. The idea, has always been, in my school, Missouri was a big learner of this. Lawyer up and shut up. That's what you should be doing when these things come to your doorstep. And, the NCAA, we'll see under new NCAA head, Charlie Baker, former or current, I guess, but about to be former governor of Massachusetts, whether or not they can control these things. But my thought is no. And my thought is that it's going to be a new body governing this. But here's the problem is that, what are we talking about with the guidelines? Are we talking about we talk about NIL collectives as nonprofits or whatnot. How do we regulate exchanges, right? So what are we paying the player for? Appearance here, show up there. How are those businesses / players protected to make sure they get the money that is being, it's being guaranteed to them? How do the businesses or whatever ensure that they're getting the return from the athlete? What happens if said athlete decides to transfer and the contract is multiple years? All of this stuff is not being, and that's not even mentioning the tampering part. What is the penalty for a third party? Because here's the thing, guys. Drake Maye could show you whatever contact has happened, right? He could show texts, he could show call records, and I'm sure some third-party means are being used, but I'm sure all this stuff could be proven as well. Just as much as they're trying to circumvent the system, it could be pretty easily proven that people are going out of their way to do this. And my colleague, SiriusXM, Gabe Eichert, I mentioned him a lot, but he mentioned this too. At this point in time right now, because there is there's such a lack of regulation, the only people who could catch the perpetrators, you'd say, of this tampering are the players, because they're the ones with the evidence to expose it. And they're incentive, they're not particularly incentivized to do that, because maybe they could transfer at some point in time, whatever. But also their job is not to be at the center of a massive scandal about cheating and tampering in the transfer portal of NIL. Some of those kids are just like, you know what? I want to play, right? I want to play. I want to make some money on NIL. And I don't want, I might want to say, hey, coach, or hey, collective, I'm getting paid. They've offered me this much. Can you guys up it so I can stay here and play football? All that kind of stuff is happening. And there needs to be a serious governing body figuring all this out, because it is so hard to wrap your head around all of it. And look, do I agree with Pat Narduzzi where it's going to get worse? I'm not sure I do necessarily, because at some point in time, maybe he is right. Maybe I am wrong. But are people just going to keep paying tons and tons of money for athletes? Or is it just because we're in the infant stages of NIL that we're going to see these massive amounts? The market eventually does correct itself, right? That's kind of how these things work. What is the value? Nico, I always forget how to say his name, Amalieva, right, is a quarterback at Tennessee. He's going to be, or I'm not sure if he's on campus. I think he actually is on campus now. The rumor was $8 million for his commitment to Tennessee and his time there. At a certain point, do these businesses or business figures or whoever it is putting money into the collective care about ROI, return on investment? or do they not care about it at all? Because if you don't care, then it's funny money, right? You're not doing this for ROI. I think that's one big thing too. Like some people want a return on investment. A lot of people are just doing it to get the kids at the school. And then how much money will you put in before you say, you know what, I've put enough in. It's not turning out. Maybe A&M boosters could be an example of this down the line. We'll see. I'm not sure. But like, when do they say no? So there are all of these questions that have to be answered, but they could be answered, in a way where it's like, how about we just police this? How about there's a way where you can report messages, you can report phone calls. The player can submit a written statement saying, hey, this happened to me. I had this person contact me, asking me if I was interested in going to X place. And they told me their collective called X could offer them, or, and I think they're referring to X, could offer them this amount of money. And then an actual governing body who's got some teeth, who's got some gumption, could go and investigate this, actually does something, and then does something about it in terms of penalties. But that's going to come on the schools to like form that governing body, the conferences to form that governing body. And I'm not sure with the way all the conference interests work right now, everybody's going to want to do that. So this is the problem, though. The NCAA had their chance and they missed, and actually didn't even take a shot at it. And their shot was trying to shut it down, not regulate, not try. And here's the thing. They were not going to be perfect when it started off anyway, but they never even had a chance to be adequate or average or below average because they didn't even try, right? Well, we'll let the states handle this thing. It's an embarrassment the way they let this thing go all the way there and get to this point that it's at. So, look, a lot of this is a factor in with the transfer portal right now happening. Also, with signing day tomorrow, a lot of this comes into play, and it's going to continue to be there too. But eventually, there will be if things persist, there will be a Drake Maye who decides not to stay at Carolina, right? This kid, Drake Maye, I mean, Bud Elliott even said like $5, $6, $7 million in the open market, and that's being confirmed here. $5 million for Drake Maye, who is going to be leaving next year. Now, obviously, for the same amount of money, it's $1 billion business. So I'm not surprised. But like somebody's offering $5 million to leave, to enter the transfer portal. He is a UNC Tar Heel. They are calling him, offering him 7 figures to go play somewhere else while he is on a roster. Who is going to be the organization, the body that says, UNC, submit it? We'll see. Submit that. Submit the call. Submit whatever else you want. And we'll take a look at this. Now, obviously, it's a player's consent, but the player consents, that we should be able to do all of that stuff. So let us see on that front what happens. Next topic here, really fast. Max Duggan declares the NFL draft. Right call, ? Is my headline here. From people on the draft side, it sounds like they think this might be the wrong call. But here's the number one thing about this, and this is much like kids picking their school and whatnot. If Max Duggan feels like at this point he's played 4 years of college football and he is ready to move on with his life and go be a pro, to be honest, which might not have been something that about a year ago he thought was possible, who are we to say this is a bad choice? If he's ready to move on after this season and be like, you know what, Stetson Bennett, great. The encore might be just as good as the first one, right? The sequel might be just as good as the original for Stetson Bennett. They might win another national championship, and it might be because he played a lot better. Sure. But maybe for Max Duggan, that's not the case. That's not what he wants to see happen, and also likes his chance to go play. I tweeted this out the other day, but I think Max Duggan, much like Ellinger and Skylar Thompson before him, are going to be some of these Big 12 guys that we see go to the league and not be starters, but have long careers because they are good guys. People believe in them. They had some success in college, and they are dependable dudes, it seems like, who everybody else really likes around them and can go make some serious money. I mean, a la the Missouri Tiger legend, Chase Daniel. That guy is just cashing those checks over and over and over and over again. And Chase Daniel, man, I mean, a guy had a great career, and it kind of compared to Max Duggan with all the success that he had. Max Duggan, obviously now number 2, finishing the Heisman. And so he's got a chance. And there's a lot of parts of Max Duggan's game that have to be refined, especially for an NFL level. But the guy wants to go on to the next level. There are some people who think, hey, he could have done this for recruiting purposes. Maybe they want to bring in another person. He could have come back and played next year. And I think it would have been cool to see, but I think he knows this team is special, and maybe his success this year, he believes this is the best time to capitalize off of that. There are a lot of theories on this. My number one thought is it's the right call if this kid, after 4 years in college, believes this is the right call. Much like Spencer Sanders spent 4 years at Oklahoma State and said, you know what, it's time for me, for my future, to go somewhere else, to make some money, to go play. Max, it sounds like he could have made, upper six figures, but you know what? He said, no, I'm at the point now where my path is, I want to go to the league and fight for a spot in the NFL. I think that is what I want next. Spencer Sanders wants to play for one more year. Max Duggan wants to go and fight for a spot in the NFL. Are we to tell them they're wrong? Look, if it's all about playing football, then yeah, Max Duggan should go and should stay at TCU. That is where he is more likely to play football next season. But if Max Duggan really just cares about, it's my time. It is my time to capitalize off the great season that I had and go to the NFL and try my luck at the next level, which probably was something that when he was the backup, guys, named the backup, 3 or 4 months ago, probably not possible. And now it is. How can we blame the kid for saying no? Sucks. I'm going to miss him. I mean, I'll maintain this. Watching him in the Big 12 championship game is one of my favorite performances ever. Watching him in the end of the Baylor game was a spectacular thing to do. Going to miss that guy. Would love to watch 12, 13, however many else more games we would get of one Max Duggan at TCU. But you know what? If he feels like it's time, then who are we to say no? For draft stock purposes, could he raise it? Could he work on some things next year? Yeah, sure. Yeah, why not? But, also too, if the guy thinks he's ready to play, and he's also the guy's, I'm done with college. Okay, he's done with college then. He's ready to go to the next place, onto the next challenge, next phase of his life. And maybe he says he regrets it down the line. But you know what? This is the decision he's making now. And it leaves a very interesting situation for TCU. Do you ride with Chandler Morris? It feels like, yeah, the guy won the job out of camp anyway. But is there somebody else out there, because of the success that you've had this year, that might want to come be a TCU Horned Frog that you feel like could give Chandler Morris a fight or might deserve the job more or whatever? But that's out there right now. So I think it's a very interesting decision. I'm kind of on board with it for that reason. His future definitely unsure as it comes to Max Duggan, but if he feels like he's ready, man, who are we to tell him no? If you love Big 12 football, you got to wish nothing but luck for that kid who seems like an amazing dude. All right, that will do it for today's show. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at LOBig12. You guys can find me at JoshNeighbors_. Get the show wherever you get your podcasts. And once again, please subscribe. Help us get to 3K by the end of the month. All right, till next time, my friends, as always, stay safe.